What's the code? So the code, oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. Um, the code is on my screen right here. All right. So this will end. So we'll have a break at 40 minutes, and then after that'll be a 10-minute break, and then we'll do another 40 minutes. So this will end at around, I think, 3. Should end at 2:50, I believe. All right, so I'm assuming everyone's checked in now. So let's go ahead and get started with this workshop. So I'm assuming most of you guys have done some sort of programming Python, probably for your computer science class or something. And most of those programs are probably limited to, either taking like keyboard or mouse input, or even like taking file input or whatever, right? But that stuff, a lot of that stuff is really static, right? So you have to have a user there, and you can't really like, it doesn't, I guess it doesn't, it's harder to get dynamic information, right? It's just whatever the user says, but you might want additional information that the user can't provide, or it might be formatted in a way that isn't as nice to a user, but it's really easy for a machine to load and then display somewhere else. So that's where kind of the web request part of this comes in. We have like, you can access thousands of services through what are called APIs. So that's an application programming interface. So what that allows you to do is pull information from other services. So the example that we're going to be using throughout this workshop is going to be a weather service, just because it's pretty straightforward to use. So it'll allow you to give more dynamic information again to your users. Okay, so that's checking code. I'll give it at the end as well in case you still haven't checked in yet. But the first thing I want to go over are just the web request types. So there are a few web request types that you should be aware of. Web requests, by the way, run on what's called HTTP. So that's the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So whenever you're on some sort of website, for example, if you're on google.com, right, you'll see this HTTP, and we have an S here that just stands for secure. So this connection is encrypted. But HTTP is a language that web servers use to communicate to your browsers and other clients. So there are a couple different request types. So when we're getting information, we are issuing what's called a GET request. And by the way, guys, don't worry. This is all in. There's also a workshop summary that will be posted after the workshop's done. So if you didn't quite get something, that will be, you can grab that information after. But anyway, so this is a GET request. So this is generally getting information. Then we have what's called a POST request, and POST requests allow you to send information to a server. And then, of course, you also have a few other ones, such as PUT, which is modifying a resource in the server all at once. So, for example, you can put a user, and that will update an existing user to update all their fields. So for example, if you had like their name and their date of birth, you'd be able to put a new name and date of birth, and it'd completely replace all the information. Then you have the delete request, which allows you to delete information. So for example, you can delete a user using a delete request. A patch request is similar to a put request, except it allows you to modify individual you guys aren't supposed to see Google. This is just a really quick intro to just web request types, and then we're going to go into actual stuff. Yeah, I didn't really feel like making a PowerPoint because there's going to be like 2 slides, and you guys will have access to the summary later anyways. It's David. My name's David. Yeah. So delete request allows you to delete something. And then after we have patch, which allows you to modify specific fields of some sort of object. And then options lists kind of the settings, if you will, for the serving web server. So the first thing I want to go over is something called Json. So that stands for JavaScript Object Notation, but in fact, it can be used for basically any in any sort of language, and it is very common. It's a very common way of communicating information over an API. So you guys probably, I'm going to actually just increase the font size of it here. Okay, so you guys probably know of a Python dictionary, right? So if we just were to say like ages or something, right? We have like Bob, and that translates to 18. You know, John, which will translate to like 40 or 50, I guess. And then let's say like Rachel, if I can type properly, is like 12, right? And then after, if you save this and run it, save and run it, you'll be able to access information here, right? So ages at Bob will equal 18, for example, right? And you can also nest this, right? So you can say like Rachel, and then we can have like Rachel at last name is, let's say, like Smith, and then age is what was it? 30 or whatever. That's definitely not it. But anyway, so now, right, we can access those 12. Okay, well, my memory is terrible. Right, and now we can access more stuff here, right? So hopefully you already did this in your ComSci Club or whatever. That's a dictionary, and Json is very is very similar to these dictionaries. So in fact, at this moment, this is actually valid JSON right here. So if we can, like, this is valid JSON. So if we set this, if we go and actually validate the JSON here, it'll say it's valid. Right. This is valid JSON over here. Okay, so you can see it's very similar to how dictionaries work. So using these JSON objects, we can make web requests to services. So what we're going to be using to do that, technically you can use a lot of low-level stuff to send a web request manually, but generally we don't like to do that. We like to use a layer, some sort of abstraction, so that if anything lower down changes, we don't need to change our code, right? So we use that generally with a library, and we're going to be using the request library. This is a very popular library to send web requests using Python. And you can just go ahead and install that by opening up your command prompt or your PowerShell, or if you're using Mac, will the programs work in REPL? It will. It'll also work in REPL, Replit. So you can go ahead, and if you're in Replit, actually, I'll just show you. If you're in REPL here, you can go ahead and just click on packages and search for requests right here. And then it'll automatically install it. If you are using a shell, if you're using a local Python, you can go ahead and just type pip install requests. And then after, it'll install requests for you. All right, I already have it installed, but it will install for you. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a couple minutes just to get that installed. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. Make sure this is installed because we'll be using it for the rest of the workshop here. Uh, All right, what was the error, Krish? Okay, so that means if you have like a command not registered or something, um, okay, here's how you can figure out where Python is. So I expected this. um, what you can do is, so open up command prompt again, and then, oh yeah, you can reinstall Python, or what you can do is open up idle, and then type import sys, and then just say sys.path. So this will tell you where your Python is. So for example, here we can see that my Python is at C users David app data local programs Python 3.9. So ignore the lib and idle lib part. Just it should say like Python and then Python like 3.9 or 3.8 or 3.7 or whatever. So if you go here and then go back to your command prompt, you can say cd and then just type in this thing, but get rid of the double slashes. So in this case, this will be C users David app data local programs Python and then Python 3.9. Okay, and then what you can say is you can put a dot and then a backslash Python -m pip install requests. And this should let you install it as well. So here, I'm going to keep this up here. All right, so import sys, then use type sys.path, search for something that looks like this. And then type cd. Then after paste it in without the double slashes, and then type /python -m pip install request. Import sys, you get the same error. No, import sys in idle. So open idle. Don't do it in command prompt. To do it in idle. All right, and if that doesn't work, you can just head over to Replit, and you can do it, all these examples online. Okay, so all right, so let's move on. Yeah, so do that for now, and you can figure that out. I would just like, if you have time later, just follow what Evan said and just reinstall Python. Yeah, if requirement already satisfied, it means you already have it. So let's go ahead and import request now. Requests. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to make a get request. So these are really simple. Just say r equals, so response is going to be, the response to the request is going to be stored in that variable. We'll say request.get, and then we're going to use something called the Postman echo service. So it's just going to echo back exactly what we send it. All right, so this is really great for testing or something. So let's say request.get, and then it'll be this link here. And then let's send it some parameters. So whenever you're, like sometimes you're logging into something or like just navigating to a page, and you see the question mark and you have like user ID equals whatever, and whatever. So, right. So these are what we call URL parameters. So that is a way that even with a GET request, you can send some information to the server. So for example, if this endpoint was to get users, we might say username equals whatever, so that the server only sends back the username you want, the information about the user that you want. So we're just going to set, like, for example, user name equals, I don't know, hello123. Okay, so now if we run this, it won't show anything. But now our request information, the information that's been returned by the Postman echo service, is available in this object here. So we can type out, we can actually get quite a bit of information about the response here. So if we want just the plain text version of the response, we can type response.text. So this will show you this. So just for reference, actually, if we open up just in your regular browser, your browser, whenever you're navigating a web page, actually sends a GET request. We'll see this is what is returned to us, right? So if we can just, if we want to just print response.text, that also works. And we get all the information, right? But as you can see here, this is actually a JSON object. So request actually has a way for you to print out the response as a JSON, and that is using a response.json. All right, so now if we run this, we can see that this is in a nice object here. And if we use pprint, should be able to pprint dot, what was it? Pprint dot this. All right, we can say pp.pprint response.json. We'll get a really nice looking thing here. Okay, so this shows us the response text. Okay, so that's how you get that's how you send a GET request. And now we can move on to sending POST requests. So POST requests are requests that send information to a server. And there are multiple ways of sending this. Kind of the main two ways are either using form data or using a JSON object. In this case, we'll be sending it using form data, but we can just as easily send it using JSON. So instead of using /get this endpoint, we're going to use the /post endpoint. And now instead of putting all of our info in the URL, we're going to actually create a payload object. So this is going to be what we're actually sending to the server. And let's say, for example, username is hello123. And let's say like age, like let's say, or email. Let's see someone's like registering for a service. So we want to create a new user. We send a POST request with their username and email at example.com or whatever. Okay, so now we simply add the data equals payload parameter, and then request will send the data that we gave it as a form data. Let's also print this. We'll see here that, oh, whoops. Oh, whoops. Now we see here that this is what was sent to it. So again, if we use the pprint library to pretty print this, we can see that we were sending it using form data. So as you can see here, whoops. We can hear that, right? We sent it using a form right here, right? But let's say we wanted to send it as a JSON object, which a lot of APIs require you to do. Instead of using form, instead of using this data, we could just put JSON equals. And then now request will send it as a JSON body instead of a form body. Now we see form is empty, but the data over here has a value. All right, so does that make sense to everyone? Let me just run a poll. Yeah, well, let's just say oh yeah. All right, so I just sent over a poll. All right, so the majority of you guys are saying it's kind of fast, so I'll slow down a bit. So here's a post request again, and I'm just gonna actually have the get request example here as well. So remember, a get request generally is retrieving information from the server and isn't really sending it any new information. It might send it information about the its requests, like for example, like a username or some sort of like query parameter, but it won't be sending it generally, won't be sending it the server any sort of new information that it doesn't already know. All right, so you wouldn't use a get request to create a new user, for example. But again, also like this is all semantics. So there is no hard and fast rule saying that you can't do it. It's just that it's generally recommended that you don't. And we have a lot of API designs that follow that sort of design there. So a big thing you're probably going to see is something called a REST API. So REST API treats everything kind of as an object. So a GET request would only retrieve the information about the object. A POST request would create a new object. A PUT request would update an object. A PATCH request would modify a specific property of an object. And a delete request would delete the object. So that's going to be a setup that you're going to see really often because it makes the work of the developer a lot easier, because all you need to know is the endpoint. You don't need to figure out like, for example, like /delete user, right? You can just send a delete request to the user endpoint. So that's why we have these types of requests, just so that it's really a lot easier for developers to create applications that will interact with APIs, because a lot of these APIs are really specialized and you might only use them once or twice. So not every developer is going to know every single API and every single behavior of the API. You want to make something pretty standard, right? So that's why that's there. And honestly, it does make the developing for like using other APIs really, really simple, because you generally will just change out the endpoints. And most of your code regarding just creating the request can stay the same. But just to note that post requests, the server can still return stuff from the post request, right? So it's just that post requests are generally sent to create new objects. All right. So something else that you can do that I would really recommend you do is download something called Insomnia. So Insomnia is a visual builder. So this, instead of using code, you used like, here, I'll just open it up. So instead of using code, you have this really nice interface. So if we were to make this request in Python here, we can just say /get over here. We just create a new request. And then after, our body is going to be, well, our query parameter, sorry, is going to be username is hello123. All right, and then we send it and it gives us this response pre-formatted. So this is really useful during development when you're trying to figure out what an API's behavior is. If you have this visual interface, it makes things a lot easier. So again, that I'll just send the link to that here. Highly recommended. And you can have these all stored up. So if you want to send a post request, I can do that as well. We can make it a JSON body, or we can make it a multi-part form, or whatever we want. So if we want to make it a JSON body, we can just slap in this JSON right here. And we have all the information all laid out really nicely. All right. So again, I'm going to keep up this code during the break. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm also going to add the lesson plan into the event section so that you can head back and look at the stuff that we just did. Also, I'll stay here and answer any specific questions you have, and then we'll pick it back up at 2:10. All right. So give me a sec as I add that into this event, and then you'll be able to see it. Okay, so that's in. So if you refresh your event page, instead of saying you have confirmed, you have checked in, it should now say the lesson plan link. So you can view that. That also show you what we're about to do next. All right, so go take a quick break. Get some water, get a snack or whatever. If you have any questions, you can ask. So far, we've gone up to part 6, which is post requests. Oh, no. I forgot to pull up the stream chat. But yeah, Alice, Postman, I found Postman was just kind of getting really bloated. So I switched over to Insomnia. But Postman is also a really great program for that as well. And yes, you can do CRUD with any kind of web request. And so again, any questions, feel free to ask right now. And we'll be back at 2:10. Oh yeah, sure. I'll say it after the break again, just so that everyone who's back can get it as well, and then also I'll repeat it again at the end. This workshop's going to end. Let me check. Around 2:50. We have another 40 minutes. All right, it's 2:10. Here I'm going to. All right. So yeah, here's the code again. If you guys came in late or something, um, uh, where is the code? Da, 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 da. Somewhere here. Here it is, right here. Yeah, we just wanted to keep this just that way people can't like double dip or something and get double the points for going to like both of the workshops at the same time. Yeah, so that's why we're being a little coy about posting it everywhere because we want to make sure that it's fair and that people aren't getting extra points or whatever. All right, so has everyone got this? I'm assuming so. All right, so go ahead and check in. I can actually just see who's checked in and make sure the number matches vaguely with how many people are here. It's on my screen right now. If you look at my screen, I posted it's D04C0D5C. All right. Yeah, so that's what I was about to do anyways. Let me just check for um yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. So, all right. So, that's the code. I'll show it again at the end in case you forgot the second time. It's fine. All right. So, basically what we just did is I just went over the different types of requests, but well, the most common request types are going to be the get and post requests. So the get request generally retrieves data from a server. So what we're doing here is we're just importing the request library, which is what we're using to make these requests. And then we have pprint just so that we can see the JSON a little better. So request.get, then we send it the URL that we wanted it to retrieve. And then with a get request, we can use something called a URL parameter. So that's indicated by a question mark and then after a key equals value pair. All right, so in this case, we're sending it username equals hello 123. We can also chain these, so we can say like email equals hello or whatever. You can also, I actually forgot about this. You can just use params equals and send it a JSON object. So you can say username like this. Because you probably noticed that in URLs, there aren't a lot of special characters, and that's because it's actually all encoded. There's some characters that just aren't really allowed in URLs. So if you just give it as a string, you'll have some weird behavior. But if you use the params option, I'm actually going to make sure this is off the top of my head. I believe it's the params option. It'll encode it for you so that you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, so it is params. And this will encode it for you. All right. And then after, if we want to send data to the server, for example, to create a new user or register a user, or like add like an item to a menu or whatever, right? We use something called a post request. So in post requests, there are actually two different ways that we can send data. We can either use the form data body type, or we can use the JSON body type. So that's just, we don't really need to go over like the reason why, but some APIs will just request it as a form data, or some will ask it for a JSON. So if you need to send it via form data, we can use data equals, and then give it the whatever key values that we're sending it. Or if it wants JSON, we can use JSON equals payload. All right. And then if we want to check out what the server sent back to us, we can use .text to see something unformatted. But if we know that it's going to be JSON, we can use the .json method, which will transform it to a JSON object. All right. So that's what we've done so far. Again, this is also available in the lesson plan. If you go into the events tab and click on the details in the events, you'll see the lesson plan, and that's all in here as well. So next up, what we're going to be going over is headers. So headers are like a prequel to the story. If the story was your request data. So headers might talk about, like, will be the one specifying, right? Like, this is JSON, or this is form data. Or it might give, like, it might send over authentication information or cookies or whatever, right? So headers can do quite a bit. If we go ahead and just head over to, let's say, vmcs.club or 7wc.vmcs.club, I guess. And if we click F12, so this is going to be something very useful. If you right click and click inspect, or if you generally hit the F12 button, it'll open up this developer tools panel here. This will allow you to actually view what your browser is sending. So if we head over to the network tab here and then refresh the page, we'll see there's a whole bunch of stuff. But if we just go at the very top here and this slash file, we can actually see the headers that were sent by your browser. So we can see we have like accept range, access allow, control origin, whatever, content type. So content type, right, is, these are your smart headers actually. Here, right here, these are your request headers, right? We're giving a cookie. So cookies are information that is stored in your browser that lets websites store a bit of information. So for example, like, the user that's currently logged in, or like your preferred dark or light theme or whatever. That's generally held in the cookie. And then we have our user agent as well. So this is all like information about our request that the server is going to receive, so that it can handle the request properly. So for example, the user agent tells the server what browser is accessing the site. So for example, if a feature isn't supported in a browser, the server might not send it. If it recognizes, for example, that Firefox can't show this type of video, then it might send a different type of video, or it might just not send a video at all. So that's really useful, just to make sure the site works everywhere. Again, we have cookies. So cookies are is just generally a key value pair of something that the server is that the server might need. So for example, like if you have like a light and dark mode on a website, it might ask for a cookie, and it might set a cookie so that next time you go to the website, it'll stay in the mode that you chose. They can also be used for tracking and stuff. So they get a bad rap. And then if you scroll up here, this is the response header. So this is actually the headers to the server's response. So this is telling the client, in this case, the web browser, what the response is going to be like. So in this case, we are telling it, it says here that content type. So it's telling it this is an HTML document and we're using UTF-8 encoding. So that's a way that computers store text. And then after we see that the server is github.com. So it's being hosted on GitHub. And then we just have some various headers about the server that was actually serving our response. Okay, so these are headers, and this is where you're actually going to find authentication information, because authentication is generally what you'll need to authenticate generally for an API, because most of these APIs, first of all, they don't want to be abused, right? If you have some sort of someone who's a bad actor and they send like 1,000 requests a second, right? That might overload your service. So you want to check to make sure first that the user can access your API. Or for example, if you're returning sensitive information, right? You don't want, every old schmo to be able to access that stuff. So that'll be generally stored in an authentication header. Okay. Again, this is all information that you can see in the lesson plan, but we're going to just learn how to authenticate against the server. So if we're going now to authentication, I'm going to just go ahead and comment all this out. So let's say we wanted to send a username and password to an API. We're just going to go ahead and use Postman Echo again. Although it doesn't require authentication, it accepts it. So it can tell us what's being sent. So we can say response 3 equals requests dot get. Okay, and we're just going to send it, let's say, username, right? And then auth equals, and this is going to be a tuple, and we'll just send it the username. Let's say username and then the password. Okay, so now if we just look at this again, we will see that, we will see that we have the authentication right here. Do you see authorization? And then after basic, which is username and password. And then this is encoded in base64. So if we go again into our base64 decoder now, we can see that it's username colon password. And then after it's encoded in base64. But obviously request handles that for you. So you don't need to actually do that. Right. And then let's say we wanted to send some headers. So let's send, for example, let's say some sort of just random header. We can use the header parameter. And we'll say the header name. So let's say my header. And then we'll say my header information. So now this will be sent as a header. And we can see that in addition to accept encoding, authorization, and the host, we also have this my header. So now the server can act upon that information if it needs to. And then if we want to actually check out response headers, we can also do that. We do that by doing response.headers. And then after, we're looking for whatever the header name is. So for example, let's check out the content type. So what type of response the server is sending back to us. In this case, we can see that it is sending application/JSON. And that's validated because we can actually convert this to JSON. Okay, so any questions about uh, authorization as well as headers in general? So this is something that, other than authorization, you'll be working less so with directly with headers. All right, that's nice. And then one last thing that I just want to tell you guys about is sometimes you'll be using something called a bearer token. So instead of having a username and password, it'll just literally be a token. So it'll generally look like it'll be like just a whole bunch of letters and numbers together. And to authenticate with that, you can check the API documentation. It'll generally tell you, but most of the time, what you'll do is you take out the auth part and you send a header. The header name is called authorization. And then you say bearer, and then you add your token. So whatever your token is. All right. And that's how we perform something called bearer authentication. So if nobody has any questions, let me just actually quickly do a poll to make sure that everyone's all right. And if so, we're going to move on to actually applying this to a little example. All right. Okay, so it seems like you guys are all doing all right. That's good. I'm not gonna pause this time because what we're doing next is actually gonna be reinforcing what we just did. So that should be fine. So let's go ahead and actually put this into practice with a weather API. So we'll be using something called the Accu Weather API. All right, so this allows, you guys have probably seen Accu Weather. Like if you just search like weather, you'll see like, I guess not, but anyway, sometimes you'll see in here, I'll say like data from Accu Weather. So they're a pretty large company doing this stuff. But let's go ahead and register for an API token so that we can access their API. So let's go ahead and just click register. Now put in your name. Honestly, you don't need to put in your real information. You can just put whatever. Like I'll just be Hunter Smith. Um, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So just go ahead and register for an account so you get your own token. Actually, we'll use this. You can call your business whatever. You can call it like, I don't know, extremely efficient productions or whatever. You can call it whatever you want. They don't validate this. So just accept the terms of use and create an account. All right. So then once you've created an account, let me actually just link you guys as I forgot to do that. Once you create an account, it'll send an email over to you. And if you log in there, find that email. Like it's not here. All right. And you should get this email right here. So account details for whatever at Accu Weather API. Okay. So I'm going to wait a bit in case someone hasn't registered yet. And then you can go ahead and click the link and set a password here. So once you click the link here, make sure that you click on this password here and just set it to something. Right, and then you can save it. All right, so I'm gonna wait a couple minutes for you guys all to get set up. Let's see, how can I keep track of this? Let's say, yeah. I'm about to set up a poll right now. All right, so once you're done, just go ahead and click yes. So you're here and you've also changed your password. You've actually set your password. All right, so it looks like the majority of you have done that. Yeah, it's okay. So we're good. So let's move on. For the three of you who haven't yet, don't worry. All of these examples are going to be still in the lesson plan. All right, so let's go ahead and so now you should be here. So then click My Apps. Then click Add a New App. You can call whatever you want. We'll call like the best weather app. And click Limited Trial and click Other, Internal App, and Python. All right, so just fill it here. And then just click Create App. So now this will generate an API key. Wait a bit. Okay, so now it's there. So now you just click on this link here, and then it'll launch with the API key. All right, so this is mine. Use yours because I'm deleting this after the workshop. So anyway, so you have this API key now. So let's create a new file here in idle. And the first thing we want to do is, because we're going to be using the API key over and over again, let's create a variable, right? So I guess we'll first import requests because we'll need that. Let's create a variable called API underscore key. And we'll just store that. And of course, I copied it afterwards. Okay. Now that's your API key. So next thing we want to do is we want to actually figure out what we're going to call, right? Like we don't know we don't know how do we actually get weather information, right? So we can go ahead and click API reference here, and this will show us all the APIs that are available. Now, generally, like if you don't know this at all, you probably check out all these API pages and just read the description and everything. But since we're a bit short on time, I'm just going to tell you. We're going to need the locations API as well as the forecast API. Okay, so just go ahead and open those two in a new tab so that you can see the reference. And then we're going to create an app that asks the user for their location, and then after retrieve the location's forecast. So let's go ahead and first we need to get their location. So what we're going to do is Accu Weather's thing, they don't like, you can't just request like Windsor, Ontario, for example. They have locations actually as IDs. So we need to first use the location API to determine the ID of the place that we want to get the forecast from. So if we see here, I'm just going to zoom in here. If we just scroll here, we'll see what we probably want is city search, right? We want to search, so we can use city search. So if you click on this link here, it'll actually show us how we can perform this request. Wow, this is very slow. Hilariously slow. What the heck? Oh boy. We've crashed it. We've crashed it, guys. All right, there we go. So first of all, we can see that we're sending a GET request. Okay, so we're going to be using request.get. And then we'll have the URL. So this is what we need to actually send. And then we have query parameters. So this is what we need to actually send it. Yeah, I think it just broke. So let's go ahead and set that up. So we want, again, we're going to say response equals the request. And by the way, guys, in case, so I've had some people just like get frozen over this. It doesn't need to be called response. Like I could call this like pizza. It's just a variable name, but I just use response so that you guys know it's a response. If request dot get, and then we're going to give it the URL. And then we also have parameters. So we're going to also give it the parameters. And then let's see what we actually need to send it. If we scroll down, we'll need the API key. So this is also another relatively common way to authenticate against an API, especially if it's a GET request. And that is actually just including the API in the URL or in the parameters, I guess. So let's do that. So it's called API key. So that's the field. And then we're going to assign it to our variable API underscore key. And then next, we want to also send it Q, which is going to be the text to search for. So in this case, let's ask the user. So let's create a variable called user search or something. And then just ask them, where do you live? Or what city do you live in? Okay. And then after, we can just include this search part over here. Okay. So if we actually go send this, go ahead and send this. If we print out response.json. So let's say in Windsor, for example, we can see there's actually a huge amount. Now, idle is just honestly terrible at seeing these gigantic text. So we can actually just open up Insomnia. So let's open up Insomnia to see what fields we're actually interested in. So we're just going to change here, go to our query, set the API key. All right, so that's really what's useful with these types of, I guess, query builders is that it's really simple to view any sort of information. And let's just search Windsor for now. Then this. Oh boy. Um, couldn't connect a server. HTTPS maybe? Okay. All right, so now we can see, right? So this is, I wish I could blow this up for you guys, but I don't think I can. Okay, but as you can see here, this is, oh, that works. Okay, so this is what we get. So we have an array, right? So that's denoted by the square brackets of what it looks like city responses. So what we want to do is we want to send a list of the cities, right? And then the user can actually pick the specific one they want. So probably what they're looking for is like the localized name, and then probably the administrative area, and then after the country, right? So let's go ahead and just print out all the results we get. Actually, I would probably say this actually, so that we don't need to keep parsing the JSON. Okay, so if we check, excuse me, the length of the search results here, and then yeah, so then after we do that, and then after I'm just going to actually just type this out here so that you guys don't need to search for it. Search results at I, right? And then we're going to print out this. So we're going to just concatenate. We're going to first print out I plus 1 because generally humans start counting at 1, right? And after we have a dot, then the city name, then after the administrative area, like the province, and then the country. So if we do that, we will now have, let's see, Windsor again. We have all of these different Windsors, right? Now, the first one is actually the correct one, is Windsor, Ontario. So let's take input now. So let's say location, city ID. Say, please enter it right. And then after, we need to cast it to an integer because we're going to be actually just checking the array index. And then since we increased by 1 here, we need to subtract 1. And then now we actually want to get the location key, right? Because the whole point of this request was to get the location key right. Where is it? Right here. Do you see this key equals that? So that's actually what's going, that's actually Accu Weather's identifier for Windsor, Ontario. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say location key equals search results at city ID at key. All right, so now we actually have the city key. So then finally, what we're going to do is we are going to check the weather. So let's go back to our documentation here. and then click on the forecast API. So that should already be open here. And then let's just keep it simple. And let's say 1 day of daily forecast. So basically just today's forecast. So again, this is going to be a GET request. Let's click on it. And then this is our URL here. It is going to be this, and then we need to pass the location key just as a path in the URL. So let's do that now. Or actually, before we do that, let's just make sure everyone is caught up here. So I'm just going to run another poll. So this is just if you have gotten your stuff all set up here. All right. Still going a bit fast. Okay, that's fine. Most of you guys look all right. Okay, so that's good. So, yeah, okay, that's fine. So again, everything is in the lesson plan. I'm actually literally like I prepared this yesterday. I'm literally just copying word for word. When I run the code in REPL, it gives me the formatted info and the unformatted info. What do you mean by that? Just make sure you're not printing like response.txt or something somewhere. That's probably what's happening here. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Okay. Yeah. Again, this code is literally all in the lesson plan. So if you have any questions about what I'm typing, it'll all be there. Okay, so now let's actually search the weather. So let's say response 2. We're using a GET request again. And then we will do this. Okay, and then we're going to string format here. And just put in the location key. All right, so now what we need to set as query parameters again is the API key. And that's all we need for this request. Let's just copy what we have here. And now we can actually print this one out. It's not too long. It's going to be a JSON again. So we live in Windsor. So now this is actually all of our information here. So if we let's just quickly process this in .++. We are closing towards the end, so I'm going to speed up just a bit. Okay, so if we go ahead and format this to JSON, well, beautify it, I guess. We can see this is our response object. So this time I can actually show you guys this. So we have headline, and then we have the text becoming much warmer Tuesday, sorry. Then we have the daily forecast over here. And then here we have the temperature, as well as the day, what's happening in the day. So showers, which, I don't know. It's kind of late in the day already and no showers yet, but whatever. So that's probably the information we want to display to the user, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So everything in the forecast is contained in this daily forecast array here. So we can just access that first because we'll be using that a lot. So we'll just say dforecast equals response to dot JSON at daily forecasts at 0. So it's going to be the first one always. And now we're just going to print out this. So we're just looking at temperature at minimum value, right? So temperature minimum value. And then after we have the forecast during the day, it's going to be showers, right? So you can look through, you can customize this, right? There's a lot more information, but you can just access it like a dictionary and say whatever. But in this case, I'm just saying the forecast of whatever state and then the minimum temperature. So now, if we go here and send it here, we can see that it tells us there's a forecast of showers with a minimum of 43 Fahrenheit. And I have no idea what that is in Celsius. That is 6 degrees Celsius, which sounds about right. All right, so that is about the end of the workshop itself. So any last minute questions about anything we went over? Do you have any docs that covers this? Yeah. So if you go into the participant dashboard and you click on the events section and you go to details. Yeah. So if you go here, if you go events here, you should see a details button, and there'll be a link to the lesson plan there. But also Ingrid helpfully just posted that. Right. And then in that lesson plan, I actually have some, so you guys are off for the next set of workshops. What I'd like you guys to do is go through okay, yeah, I'll do that. One sec. I just want to say something. So there is a next section called building your own API. So over the next couple hours, after the activity, go ahead and try to build your own API server. So we'll be using something called Flask. I actually guide you through everything. And that's kind of your mini server. And you can use that to build APIs, whether that be interacting with a database. If you've done that before in Python, you can return that information with a rub request or whatever, right? So just go through that since you guys are off for the next set of workshops. And I will be here. So if you have any questions, you can actually go ahead and there will be a set of workshop channels that'll pop up soon. And then you can actually just ask the questions in there and I will answer them. And that's also if you have any questions for anything that we went over today. If you want to just go over this document afterwards to fill in any gaps and have any questions, you can always ask there as well. Okay. So now I'll quickly go over what I did in Insomnia. So this, I was just using it because it parses like these gigantic responses much better. So you can go in Insomnia, you can actually create a different request type. So in this case, we're just using a get request. And then we name it whatever, it doesn't really matter. And then here is the URL. So this is going to be what we pass here. Then we have parameters, which is going to be in the query part right here, the query tab. And then we just give them as key value pairs again. Then we send the request and then it's whatever. It'll return everything and you can see it. And you can also see the response headers right here. So yeah. All right. So that's it for this workshop. Hope you guys weren't too lost and that you got most of the stuff. Again, if you have any questions, you can again also go through the lesson plan that I typed up. And as well, you can always just ask the questions in the workshop channels that will be popping up relatively soon. All right, and then in the next set, you can either do whatever you want, or if you want to do a little bit more, I have an additional section on building your own API using the Flask Python server. All right, so that's it for now. Take a break, and then next up are activities. They're going to be doing quizzes, and those will also be for points. So, that should be nice and simple and fun for you guys. All right, see you guys. I'm going to go ahead and end.